Hey guys, if you're new around here, my name is Tony Gonyon and I'm the North American Ford Gas Sales Manager. I'm excited to be talking to you today about how to use VCM Editor. Whether you're new to the software or just have some specific questions about the editor, stay tuned because we're going to walk you through all the basics of VCM Editor and some important features that'll come in handy when tuning. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions on social media. Make sure you're following us online so you can also send us your questions for future videos. So let's get started with the most powerful tuning software out there. Let's get started. Today we're going to use this well-branded Volkswagen GTI to do our VCM Suite Editor discussion. If you haven't seen it already, go ahead and watch our scanner one before you get started on the editor. Let's get started. Okay, let's go ahead and we'll start talking about the editor. All right, we'll jump right in here. We're going to go through some buttonology right off the bat on the editor. We'll start off with the actual top buttons and go across. There's a little explanation of each one of these. On the file, we have open file. If you want to open a file, obviously that's an open file. You notice right next to it, there's quickie keys. We call them quickie keys like Control-0. If you hit Control-0, boom, that open it up, and you can open up a file from there. All right. Close, just so it says, you hit close, it's going to close the file. Save. All right, so whenever you modify a file, you save it. I'd recommend save as. And you save as 1, 2, 3, 4, or mod 1, 2, 3, 4. Inadvertently, because we're human, you may mess up on 4, you have to go back to 3. So just save as will be a follow-on file. Again, there's a quickie key with the save as well. Export, if you have export permissions, you would have that on your laptop as well. Recent file shows all the files you've been involved in. As you can see, there's a ton of them here on this one. Exit would actually shut the software down so you can go to a blank screen. Okay. Edit. So calibration detail is very important. When you select calibration details, it's going to give you the information from that computer. Right there, you see there, we have the actual creation date of it, which will be today, the VIN of the vehicle. It's a 2015 Volkswagen Golf GTI, 2-liter 4-cylinder. The controllers associated with it shows you what the controllers for the actual ECM and the TCM. So you have both of those on there. All right. If you want to add a controller, you could do a controller and add in for like a body control module, whatever, so if you're going to read another one or bring it in. Okay. Remote tuning. So remote tuning, if you're actually remote tuning a vehicle, you can set up as you have the master controller. The person on the end at the remote shop would be the slave, and you can set up permissions for entire rights, calibration right, or restore stock calibration. All those are there, easy to set up. You can set your restrictions on it, and in the master slave you can set for the actual interface number. Okay, super simple on that. View change history log. Anything that's changed is going to show up in there. So you can actually open in text new editor. You can actually go here and put it as a compare file, and then you can put in different collapse that you want to bring it to a tree format or a different style looking at it. If you modify a file, say we change the temperature here, change this to 50. When you change that, if I bring up the history log, it'll actually show me that's actually been changed right there. So it gives you an idea of what's actually been changed so you can go back and see it. Okay? User-defined parameters. If you have a parameter that you've done in a different software that you want to import, there's instructions now to do that on our website. We're going to do a video on that here in the future as well. To purchase a licensed vehicle, you have to go in there to your login page and actually select that. All right. Template applicator. To me, this is one of the best things we have in HP tuners to do stuff. This goes along with our template editor, which we're going to talk about here shortly, which we actually bring in the file. We can take the modified parameters, we can import those in, save it as a value file if you want to call it that, and then we can actually put it on a file that come in. Give an example. Let's say we have another 15 GTI come in and we had all the tune done for this car with all the parameters correct. We could actually build that as a template and then grab that template and put it right to the new VIN, and we'd be operational in less than 30 seconds. So instead of 30 minutes, 3 seconds is a lot quicker. Navigator, Control-N, this is your best friend when you're new to the software. When you hit Control-N, you'll come up here and type what you want to see. If you want to see Spark, you type in Spark. It brings up the parameters right there. They need to have Spark associated with it. So Control-N is your function for that. It makes it easy to find things. Super, super easy. for you to manipulate. If you're looking for any spark tables, or you hear something, or you read on the internet, you need to check out a torque table, you can type that in and it will show up there using the control N function. And view. So view, you always want to use advanced. Basic is just basic format from the vehicle. Advanced has all the parameters. I can't think of a reason that you'd want to use basic. You want to have every parameter that you want access to, so always be in advanced mode. But you always want to check that and make sure you are in advanced mode. Compare. So compare file. Open compare file. If we open up another GTI, they had a modification to it. So in this case, I have a modification to the counter threshold. So if I open up a compare file, which the only one here is a GTI read, this actually would give me in the comparison log what's been changed. It would show me the counter threshold. It would show me any other things that's been changed in the DTC list that we've changed there. Okay, so that's one way to look at the compare. The other way, we can actually select the other file from right here. So we have the show main file, and we have the show compare file. So that's what we're looking at in the file we're looking in the vehicle. This would be the compare file, and you notice that it's back to 100. If you hit the right button, show differences, and we'll go over this again, we can actually crank this to a 0. When I do that, boom, it brings it right over. Super easy to do. Okay, that's how our compare file works. So close the compare file. If you close the compare file, we close it. We're the one we're looking at. You close it. Now it goes back to just the primary file. You notice you also lose your compare functions when that's gone. Recent files. Recent files in your compare, you can go through another file that you had before. In this case, I could go back to that GTI read. It will open up that file using your actual compare recent files. All right. Makes it easy to find another file you've compared with and bring it up. Show main file is what we're looking at now. If you actually show compare file, it's going to bring up the previous file. And it would show differences. In this case, we already changed the difference, so it's not showing up. Comparison log shows us there's been a change here. We can double click on this. And in this case, it's not going to show us in the compare mode. One thing about that, when you're looking in your engine diagnostics and DTCs, you go to compare, it will not show the differences. However, it will be squared and highlighted when you go down through them. And segment swapper, in this case, we're not dealing with a GM vehicle, so we're not dealing with a segment swapper. But if we were using a GM vehicle and we needed to swap for a 6080 transmission, back and forth from that, we could actually go into the segment swapper, grab that file and bring it in. And I believe we're actually going to make a video on this in the future on using the segment swapper as well. So look forward to that. Flash. Control R would read it, Control W writes it. In this case, we've already read it, so you notice that only the right vehicle is there. If we were going to write the vehicle, we hit Control W, or we can just click this button here, or we can click this button here. Multiple points for you to write the vehicle from. That's the flash button. The tool button. All right, so unit conversions. Unit conversions, we got everything here from putting in the tire size. Let's say we have a 325, 50, 15, type that in there. It gives us the tire height, so we can plug that in when we're doing our gear tire wizard. It also has Fahrenheit to Celsius, speed from mile an hour to kilometer, things that we would normally see for changes. It also has injector calculation data. So if we had a 42-pound injector, which was at 43 PSI, and I put a same injector, but I went to 58 PSI, it would show me the difference in that. So super nice to have these unit conversions in the software for us. Calculator is pretty self-explanatory. Gives you a calculator. You can, 75 times 2, hey, equals 150. Just a calculator to do your calculations in. Now, one thing about using a calculator, I can do this. I want to show you this here. So if you're actually using an airflow number, let's say this number here. If you click this, and by the way, the easy way to use this software is try to highlight this when you're doing stuff. See how I just move the cursor on into highlight there? It's easier if you just, and I'll show you this, if I just click on the name, it highlights it for you. A lot of people are trying to do it the hard way. This is an easy way to use the system. When you highlight that, so I'm going to use a Control C, and I'm going to go to my tools and my calculator, and then all I got to do is Control V. I can take that number and say times 2. That gives me the number. Just highlight that. I go back to my number here. I just highlight it. Control V, that puts it in there. Okay? Okay, and options, we just recently opened up, and we're growing every day and putting more languages in there. I could tell you the number today, but it'll be different tomorrow because we're adding more and more languages. So for right now, if you want to change it, you would select the language and change it to it. In this case, I'm going to leave it on English because I'm not bilingual and I don't speak any other languages at the moment. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Next will be Template Editor. This goes back to our original thing about Template Editor. Now, we're going to be doing a video on Template Editor and Applicator so that we have a good defined thing on it. For right now, just know that this is where we grab our information that we've changed and save it so we can add it to other files to make it easier to change the tune. So time is money, money's time when you're tuning a vehicle. So it makes it easier and quickly for you to do it. Also, if you have a tuner and your tuner wants to send you a template to get your car started, they can send you the template, you load the template onto there, and you're operational with your file ready to go with a template. So it's a great tool to have specifically for tuners and end users. Window. So Cascade, we can put these in different, so in other words, if you want to look at the software and different things, you put it Cascade. So every time you open something, it puts it in a different format. For top vertical, you can see that where that changes across the screen. I personally like the Cascade function where it just comes down. So I open up something, it comes in and it shows it. So experiment with what you like and what you like to see, and then you can use whatever. There's no rule on that. You can tile it horizontal and go from there. So close all, when you close that, would actually close them, as you notice that. So I'm going to reopen that again to engine. You can see this is back up. All right. The next thing is this little button right here tells you what you have open. So if I close them all, you'll notice I go back to the window, it doesn't show it. So if I open up engine and I open up exhaust, if I come up to the window, it shows me engine and where I'm at. Okay, so I'm using the engine series. All right. If I'm doing engine diagnostics, it'll say what window opening, be engine diagnostics as well. All right. The help menu, obviously, it's exactly what it is. It's for help. So you can go to the help menu, you can actually open up, and what this does, it'll take you to the actual instructions from VCM Editor, all the questions are normally asked, how to get started. This is a great tutorial to go into and look at. This is being updated every single day now. So we're getting more and more data in there, making it easy. So if you have questions, definitely use our help menu to go through and look at it. There's a ton of information in here that can help you. So I would recommend reading through the help menu at that point. The next on the help menu is the license information. So if you have your device plugged in, you hit device information, it would show you any of the devices that you've actually licensed on your computer. You can see I have several on here, and it would show you what specific controllers for that computer has been used at that point. This one right here is new, the MPVI 3 we're using right now, and there's no credits or anything associated with it, so it doesn't show up. So if you have multiple cables you've plugged in, it will show all the information from those cables. The next one's Resync Interface. Very important. Whenever you plug the device in, if you've switched between cables, between a private label RTD or an MPVI 3 or an MPVI 2, always resync the interface. And what that'll do is it actually communicates with the internet. You can see this. It's going to go on there. It'll see if anything is available. If there's any updates need to be done, it'll show up as well. Resync completed. You're done. Now your laptop is now tied into that unit. VCM Suite Information is very important. There's two spaces to get that, either the little blue eye here or this. This is important because one of the things you can do when you first plug into the vehicle and you want to get the data from it, you can hit right there, the little button right there. It's going to populate. It's going to show you anything associated with it. It's going to show you the credits associated with the device, how many you used, how many have been purchased. At the bottom, if there was any codes, it would show it. In this case, I did not have the key on, so I'm going to do this right now so you can see it again with the key on. So I'm going to populate now with the key on. And it shows me information. It shows me the ECM and the TCM information. If there's any diagnostic codes, it would show up as well. Okay? So super easy. It's a good thing to have when you're sending a support ticket in. They're going to request an info log plugged into the vehicle so they get the information from the vehicle. And they may ask for a debug file as well. So that's the VCM Suite Information. MPVI 1 application keys. If you use an MPVI 1, your application key would be in here. This is where you enter it in. If you updated your credits, you have to copy and paste this in here. Kind of tedious. Actually, we're spoiled now because the MPVI 3 is out, and all we have to do is just hit Resync Interface, and it puts the credits on there for us that we purchased. So if you have an MPVI2 and you want to purchase credits from someone other than HP tuners, so you would need this information, you need the serial number, and you also need the verification code for them to enter it into the system. All right, so that's where you get that verification code for them to put it in their system to apply your credits. The next one on this is the parameter access. Once you complete your advanced training, then you have access to certain parameters. And this will give you the device code for it, and you can link the device to it at that point. Super easy. We're actually going to make a video about this here in the future and describe it in depth. And about. If there was an update that needed to be done, we would have an update here. In this case, this is updated yesterday. There's no update found, so we don't have to do an update. It tells us VCM Editor version 5.0.2 is what we're using right now for our testing. So that shows you what you're in for your VCM. All right. Now we're jumped into Editor. Editor is where we allow to do the modifications to the tune so we can write it back to the vehicle. It's very, very powerful. Remember, you're always one keystroke away from disaster, so always remember that little tidbit information. So when you're going through here, you're changing things, this is where it's all done. This is where the magic happens to tune the vehicle, okay? In that VCM Suite Information, if you notice right here, the credits purchased, credits used. Credits are how we write the vehicle licenses. You have to have the credits. It may be 2, 4, it may even be 1 credit. Certain vehicles may be even more. In this case, the credit assigned to license it would come off of this number. So if I wrote with this one, which was 2 credits, it would show me a 48, and it would show me a 2 that were used there. So that's how we use our credit-based system. We do have a video out there. It's very well detailed. Go ahead and take a look at that video and explains the credit system for HP tuners. So the next thing underneath those section up here, we have these buttons here. Same thing, just a little quicker to get to places. Like if you want to open a file, you click on that one, allows you to open a file. We have the next one. Actually, I'm going to open up the file again. All right. The next one right here, if you want to save the file, save file, you would click on that and it would save the file. Click on that, save the file. Super simple. This right here is a folder. You want to close the file, you hit that, it closes the file. The next one is calibration details. If you click on that right there, it's going to give you those details again with the ECM calibration information, the TCM calibration information. That's ready right there as well. Remote tuning, we talked a little about that. If you're going to use a remote tuning system, you can use this button to get you there quicker. View change history log, shows current unsaved as well as saved files, and you can actually save those as well. So that's a button to go to. Open compare file, like I said, if you want to open another compare file, you click on that. It'll ask you what compare file you want to go to, and you can open that file. Again, these are little quick places to get to. If we had a compare file open, which I'm going to go ahead and do, I'm going to open a compare file. So you can actually see once it's open, if there's a difference here, that would be the compare file, and that would be the difference between the two. Now we have unit conversions. Again, Celsius to Fahrenheit, tire size, injector size. Same thing was in our little tools up there, except it's a little button we can go directly to. People ask, why do we have it in multiple places? Because when someone's doing something and may not want to go to a drop-down menu, it's quicker to get to this button to bring it up. I call them quick keys to get me there faster. Okay? If we wanted to read the vehicle, this would be available. In order to have that, we'd have to have no file open. Obviously, the write to vehicle, there's our button to write to vehicle, do that, or we can hit Control W. And here's our VCM Suite Info button to bring up the information from the VCM and the vehicle. So now we're going to talk about the lower toolbar. So favorites. Okay, so what you can do with favorites, let's say you have a favorite that you're doing a master transfer function. You can save those in there. So every time you open up a file, the master transfer function will come up as your favorite. That may be something that you're doing multiple cars or multiple UTVs. Say you want to change the torque management on them, you can set that in as your favorite, and every time you click on it, it'll take you right there every time. So if you got 3 vehicles in a row and you want to do them all for torque management, you can bring that up, boom, 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 instead of cycling through. Again, time is money, money's time when you're tuning a car. The next one would be an OS. In this case, in the GM world, we have multiple operating systems, And in the Ford world, we have certain operating systems that we have updated for like trans brake and stuff like that, and later on the Mustangs. We also, in the UTV world, we have operating system updates to allow us to get better data logging. So always check your OS button to see if there's any OSs available that may need to be upgraded, that you may be used for better data logging, change to a trans brake, or upgrade to a 2 or 3 bar map sensor in the GM world. Engine takes us right to that thing. We're looking at our engine data. In engine, we have general. So this is kind of an overview, but to give you an example, it's going to give us our engine size. It's going to give it different data, what kind of pump it has, engine coolant temp stuff. The next one's idle. Obviously, idle self-explanatory. It's what the idle RPMs are set to. And underneath that one, there's a torque one for idle as well. In the torque one, there's idle reserve for torque. Most of the engines now are torque based, so they're going to use some type of torque based control of the idle. So that's why we have the torques listed there. Airflow, several here with a general. We're talking about, you know, the inlet pressures, things like that. In this case, this is a GTI. So we got speed density tables coming into play here. And our electronic throttle controls for wide open throttle versus, you know, part throttle. Throttle limits, if we want to set it to 50% throttle opening, we can do that in here. Charge motion plates, if it has charge motion plates, it'll be listed where you can do the opening, closing, or look at the flag when it's opening and closing. Variable cam, obviously if it has variable cam, this is the adjustment point you're going to go to change the variable cam positions. Lots of information here. Again, you're one keystroke from disaster, so study up on variable cam before you start changing things. Pressure control, this comes in where how much boost you're going to make. Gives you adjustments to change how much boost you're targeting, what the pressure is, what the wastegate difference is, things in that in your pressure control. And obviously in turbocharger, we have max speeds, whether it's equipped or not. The blow-off valve, the wastegate controls are all inside the turbocharger stuff here. And again, each vehicle is going to have its own different tables that it's going to use to control certain things. Obviously, you know, on a GM Camaro, you're not going to have a turbocharger set up in there to control wastegate. It's just not in there. But in a GTI, it is. And your Ford EcoBoost the same way. Exhaust, you have your catalyst protection stuff in here, as well as, you know, the temperatures for it's going to reach a certain point where it actually comes in and adds fuel on the catalyst. Okay, so that's your catalyst controls in your exhaust. Fuel, important one, obviously we have general, you have your stoic fuel ratio, you have whether you're rich or lean, you have your controls for your fuel pumps here. Oxygen sensors, there's minimum lambda and a minimum lambda alternate on the GTI. In a Ford, GM, and Chrysler world, you're going to have your forward and aft 2 sensor controls as well, plus your open and closed loop stuff, which is on the next page on this one. So open and closed loop, it's going to show you your fueling and open. It's going to be your base fuel tables, things like that. That's all in your fuel tables. Power enrichment, when you go to wide open throttle, power enrichment is coming into play. It gives your target lambda at wide open throttle. That's where it's going to be found in your power enrichment tables. In the temperature controls, we have the catalyst controls. If the temperature reaches a certain point, it will need to add more fuel. If that's the case, this is where the targets would be, and this is your component protection. We could change this number, and it's in lambda. So if you understand lambda, you understand where to put it. Cutoffs, you got your rev limiter. In neutral, as in, you know, where that stops when you put it to the floor in neutral, or your maxed RPM if you're wide open throttle on the vehicle, it's only going to turn. In this case, it's set at 8160. And there's other controls in here that come into it. You also have your burble controls, things like that. And that's over here as well. Lean fuel saving. In this vehicle, it's not a big deal. However, in the GM world, you have your active fuel management system, as we call DOD. That would be listed in here. You would have your controls here for that. In the Mopar world, we have the MDS, and we'd go in there and actually disable that or enable that from this point as well in our lean fuel saving. Flex fuel, if the vehicle is a flex fuel vehicle, these are where the controls would be for it. So we have them defined, you know, if it's an F-150 with flex fuel, if it's a late model Camaro or late model truck that has flex fuel, it'll show up in here. This is where the controls are. All right. Spark. Okay, this is where Spark Advance is, the tables for the knock, your MBT, your borderline spark, your minimum spark between shifts, all that's going to follow in your Spark tables. Along with Spark, we have retard functions with the knock sensors. How much retard is going to be retarded? These are the controls to control that in retard. Dwell. If you have certain coils and you've modified the coils and you want to put more dwell into the coils, this is where you would actually change those. So if you change a coil that requires a different dwell setting, this is where you would find these controls. And the knock sensors themselves, the threshold for the knock sensor, the gain from the knock sensor, these are where the controls are in the knock sensor tables. The next will be torque model. Torque model, again, these engines are torque based, so in a certain thing it may need torque at this throttle position, at this throttle position, different torque. These are where the modifications would be for your torque settings. Monitoring. In the system being a torque monitoring, in a Ford you have monitor controls. If it exceeds those controls, then it will put it in limp mode or called failure mode. In this case, I don't see anything here, so this vehicle and monitoring has only one selection on it. Torque management. Okay, that's part of our fast stuff we've talked about before in previous videos. So when the torque management is very important, you can modify the torque management of the vehicle and pick off a half a second in like a Dodge Challenger just by modifying the torque management without touching anything else in the tune. So torque management is very important. Study and understand how the torque management is affecting this vehicle, and this is where the modifications would be done. You notice in there it has a driver demand. In the torque management, the pedals requesting the torque, the PCM's requesting the torque of the engine, the fuel appropriately with it. So this is where the torque controls are done in the driver demand tables. And again, if I had a turbocharger, which this one does, there are controls here for the turbocharger affecting that driver demand torque. Okay, now we're into the engine diagnostics in the general table. Diagnostics mean where the controls are for like the math, things like that, and diagnostic controls. So here with this GTI, we've got certain ones here with similar conditions, RPM limits, diagnostic text for voltage tests are there. These are where those things would be at, whether you're setting a max mass airflow voltage in a Ford or a GM, it's all gonna be in these general tables in the engine diagnostics. Airflow, obviously the airflow, if it's got throttle leakage, it's got a different, a vacuum leak, something like that. This is where you can go into airflow and you can set the different tables to check certain things. Again, it's in engine diagnostics. Misfire. So if you have a big thumpy cam in a vehicle, it's going to pick up a misfire. This is where you would dampen that misfire data. In this case with the GTI, it's got a duration counter. So after so many misfires, if it had a bad plug, it's going to kick on a check engine light and tell you what cylinder has the misfire. This is what the misfire data comes from. So the DTC menu is going to have all your codes, whether it's an SAE or an actual specific vehicle code. So whether it's an intake sensor code, as you can see, all the way down to the O2 sensor codes. Now you'll notice over here we have some graying out. These will actually be available once the advanced parameters testing is completed. You'll have access to these. Transmission, all right, this is the transmission controls. Everything from your controls, we're going to talk about real quick, I'm going to go through them. In the general menu, we have our RPM limits of the shaft speed, the output shaft speeds. These are where it's going to be found in our general. In shift general, it's going to actually have the controls for shifting of the transmission, the firmness, the pressures, things of that nature. Shift scheduling, just like it says, where you want the transmission to shift at, 1 to 2, 2 to 3. This is where this information is going to be. Now, this one has some sub-menus to show you. It has a normal drive mode, it has an economy mode, has a sport mode, and a manual mode. Each one of those are listed so you can modify according to that, which makes it really nice to be able to control for how you want to drive the car in what mode. Shift pressure is the next thing. Your general shift pressures, whether you want the transmission pressure to be firmer or softer, you can bring and modify here. And then you have your adaptives. Adaptives meaning that it's that you drive the car, it's going to learn how you drive the car, and that's where the adaptive menu comes in. And you can modify the adaptive periods as well to learn. Shift timing. Okay, so if you want the transmission to shift firmer, then you would quicken up the timing on it. These allow you to do the controls in normal mode, and you have a economy, a sport, and a manual, as you can see here. And in the upshift, the same thing. It has an upshift for your controls for the shift timing, and you also have the downshift controls for your shift timing. So you may want it firmer on the downshift if you're road racing the car. You want to make it softer if you're just driving around. These are where you make your adjustments. Torque management for the transmission. Again, a major control thing here to be able to modify the torque management. So you can enable or disable certain things in here to make it firmer, softer, however you want. Again, study up on how you want to adjust these, but you have it for your upshift as well as your downshift. Again, how you want to drive the car or how your customer wants to drive the car, these are where you make these adjustments at. transmission diagnostics. If there's transmission diagnostic data in here, the things that you can change, it will be listed in the diagnostic tables. There's not much here on this GTI, obviously, but if the line pressure is too high, whatever else, you can move the pressures. This transmission diagnostics is where it would fall for that data. In the transmission diagnostic data, on some vehicles, you'll have DTC menu as well, and you can access those. Fuel system. So fuel system, we have the fuel pressure. Obviously, what pressure is supposed to be set at. We can change the setting from PSI to bar to, all the way up to KPA. We can change those. That's what those little settings on the side, little tidbit information there when you're doing them. So with the fuel pump, for the control, we can say how much duty cycle it has. On some of the vehicles, we can change this number to pump the gas out of the gas tank. We can use that for that. So it makes it nice. Fuel pump control module, it actually desired pressure for the module. This is where you would control for most of your vehicles that have a non-return system are going to have a fuel pump driver module. This is where the controls would be. Fuel tank. Some of the vehicles you have, you may want to change a gas tank in. Say you're doing an F350 and you want to put a 60-gallon tank from the 34-gallon tank, you can actually do that, and you actually have access in some of them to change that setting so your gauge will be correct. But this is where it would be set at, here in your fuel tank gauge settings. Fan system would be the next one. Obviously, we don't have any fan system controls in this GTI, but this is where we would actually set the fans to come on earlier or later, depending on what we're doing with the vehicle. Last but not least, speedo. So speed limiter, it's a big one on that. This is where the limiter is at. So if you got your 16-year-old going to go drive the car, you can put the speed limit at 60 mile an hour, or if you want to drive it, you can put it at 155. So obviously this is where the speedometer limiter controls are going to be in this. Also in Speedo and other vehicles, you may have your calibration data here as well, where you'd actually set the calibration for the tire size as well. Most of the newer vehicles are actually using the body control module, which is controlled through the scanner to do your speedometer calibrations. So one of the questions we have is that when we go to read a vehicle, there's multiple modules on there. What if I just want to read the ECM and I don't want to read the TCM? Well, I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So first thing is going to be the read vehicle function. I'll gather the info. It's going to tell me it's a GTI. You notice that there's two modules there, okay? So read entire, and we also have the TCM. If I just want to read the engine on this, all I got to do is go do not read, and it'll just read the engine. So the next one of the questions we had is that how do we adjust our fueling depending on IAT? Well, today in this GTI, we actually have an IAT threshold temperature that we can select with a target lambda. So in this case, the target lambda, if it's 140 degrees, is going to go to 1.0, all right? So if we made this, 160 over that, and we'd want it to go, personally, I would actually fatten it up if it goes over that. But this is where you would actually go to target lambda based on the IAT. One of the questions we also had was about how to adjust our fueling at idle, what we're commanding for idle. In this case, I've brought up an actual S197, and I brought up the fuel base versus RPM versus TPS, which is throttle position sensor. You'll notice at 1.0 lambda, we're commanding at the point of throttle position of 14.6 or idle at that point. As we step into the throttle, as we go into it, it goes into the commanded lambda of 0.86. So if you wanted to change this for some reason to 1.1 or 0.97, you could do that. Now these are affected by a couple of things. One of the things is on a cold start, it's actually going to be a little different. So your fuel base right here is this, and then cold start's a little different on it. So a cold start may be actually a little richer or a little leaner, but normally you want to make your adjustments on your actual run, which is over 170 degrees. So on the question of adjusting the idle fueling, it's targeting whatever the fuel base is. In this case, it's targeting 1.0 lambda. So 1.0 lambda on this vehicle would actually be stoic of 14.08. So if you're looking at your fuel trims or your air fuel wideband, it'd be targeting 14.08, trying to get the percentages right. So if you wanted to change that, you could come in here, say you want a little leaner. You could say, okay, at this point between, I'm at idling here, I want it at 0.98. I could put that in there, and that's what it would actually target. So it's a pretty straightforward way of targeting the lambda for your idle fuel. So the question was asked, how do we add spark in a spark table? In this case, this is an SRT4 and a wide open throttle spark table. On the left-hand side, we have map pressure in KPA, and obviously this is a boosted application. And across the top, we have the RPMs. If we know for a fact that, in this area we wanted to add 1 or 2 degrees, it'd be simply as adding 1 or 2 degrees. Now, what I recommend you do is take a look at the graph first. look at it, okay? See how it's not really, doesn't have big spikes sticking up and everything else? So you don't want to go in here and, you know, put in here like 34, because you go to look at it, there's your spike sticking up right there, okay? So I don't recommend doing that. So if you're looking at it and it needs that, you want to add a little spark to it to see if it picks up, then by all means, you could actually go in there and look at it. When you data log it, look for knock, very important, make sure you have no knock. But let's say in this area right here, at 3,300 up at 210 kPa, you wanted to add another 2 degrees. Put 2 degrees in there, save it, write it to the vehicle, make a pull if there's no knock and it looks good. Adjust accordingly. Just remember, when the farther you go on the timing, the closer you get to pre-ignition or detonation. So be very careful on that. So one of the questions we ask is, hey, do I need to buy a system to make my pedal more responsive? And I say, no, you can do it through the tune. And this is where we do it. We're going to use our torque management. In this case, it's a 2015 Mustang. And we went to our torque management, driver demand, and now we have our pedal characteristics. Now I'm going to show you what this looks like. In normal mode, you see right here, this has been modified, where the pedal here from 0 to 100%, and as you step on the pedal up here, about at this point at 22% pedal, we're 26% throttle. Now, from the factory, these would be matched. 17.9, you see the bottoms matched. They would match all the way up 100 to 100. So it's a 1-to-1 ratio. In sport mode, which we like to use, sport mode is more aggressive, and you can see at 38% pedal, we're basically at 50% throttle opening. So the pedals, when you're stepping on the pedal, the throttle is actually happening faster, so it has more throttle response in this case. This is where the driver demand comes in to make those adjustments. Now, just a little note, if you have an 18-up vehicle and you do this, your skip shift will not drive correctly. It will feel weird to you. So just so you know, make adjustments according to that as well. Okay, so someone asked about copying a file from one vehicle to the other, or copying files from a vehicle to another vehicle. I'll give you an example. So we have a 15 Mustang, we have a stock file, and then we have a file that's modified. So the file that's stock is the one we're working on, and we want to put a file onto it. So if we have a file that's modified previously from a same style vehicle, then we can use that data. Really simple process. In this case, I'm going to open it up. I'll go ahead and open up a stock file. And I'm going to use the compare function to bring up the other file. So now I have a file that has modifications done to it. And how I can tell, if I open up Spark or Fuel, whatever, you see the difference. The green tells me that there's something different about this. Now, the best part to me, the easiest way, is to look at a comparison log. This gives me everything that's different from that vehicle. So being it's the same year, it's an automatic and everything else there, one thing I could do if I just want to copy over everything at one time is I could just go up here and right click and copy over all the differences. Now, I don't necessarily recommend that, and one reason why is because between the 15 to 16 and 17 years, there's a little different oil pressure sensors, and if you change that and you crank up the car and it says no oil pressure, your customer is probably going to lose his mind because they have no oil pressure. In this case, I don't recommend doing all of them at one time. So you can actually go in and select the differences. You can pick this one right here, say I want to change over my IMRC controls. You copy that over. If I want to do my fuel enrichment, I could copy that over. All you do is right click on it, copy over, select the differences, and it moves it over. If you want to move all the files, like I said, you go up to engine, you can right click, copy over all differences, and guess what? You just moved everything over. And again, you're taking a chance that some things might be slightly different in there. So I highly recommend pick and choose you want. So one of the questions we have is about PATS, the Passive Anti-Theft System, and how to disable it. If you have an S197 car, pretty much any Ford from 99 up that we support, you can go in and disable the PATS system. Let's go in there and show you exactly how to do that. It's pretty simple. I've got a 10 Mustang here. I open up a system format. Right over here you see PATS switch. All we got to do at this point is disable that, save the file, write it to the vehicle. Pretty straightforward and simple on disabling the PATS on one of those. On a Coyote platform, with our software, you cannot disable the PATS system, okay? So that has to be sent off to someone else to be disabled. Our software does show a switch for it, but it is not enabled in our software at the moment. If it's a Camaro and you're dealing with a late model Camaro or a Cadillac or a Corvette, there's multiple functions you have to do on that, and we're going to make a video on that in the future to show you exactly how to do that. I hope you found this video useful in learning how to use VCM Editor and about some of its key features. If you're ready to start tuning your vehicle, make sure you watch our credit and licenses video that's linked below to get started. If you have more questions about VCM Editor that we didn't cover today, make sure to leave a comment below so we can get back to you personally or answer it in future videos. As always, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon so you never miss an upcoming video. My name is Tony, and I'll see you in the next video. See ya.